welcome to Hopscotch Friday, your pop culture binge with Stevie and Emmett.
Hello, welcome to Hopscotch Friday. This is Emmett,
And Stevie.
and we are talking to another over Skype. And not because we're in different rooms, we're in totally different geographic locations.
You made it sound like that's something special or different or all of the above.
All of the above, absolutely. It's a strange experience. You're not here. I'm talking to you. You're in New South Wales. I'm in Victoria.
Correct.
You're not drowned yet.
No, thankfully. The weather has been quite hectic, but where I am is not too badly affected as far as I know. But there is extensive flooding in places that are not here.
Hmm.
Just very wet and very moist. Moist.
Yes, you took off, and I was immediately like, "Oh, don't say anything about the bad weather," because I was just like, "Oh no."
What can you do?
Yes, so we needed to drop an episode, and you suggested we talk about Stranger Things season 4,
Yes.
which everyone else and their
It,
cat is also talking about right now. So,
well, exactly. What does the cat have to say?
meow, mostly.
Oh, that's Wanda's review.
A succinct review.
Just meow.
Or
More to the point, she's probably just hissed about it.
yep. So did you want to summarize the season and we can get stuck in?
I'm not really sure how to summarize the season. I was just thinking about how I might go about doing that. My summary is that I think it was better than the last one. That's an impression, though. That's not a summary of the premise or what's going on.
Yes, so I mean, this podcast has something of a weird relationship to Stranger Things in that I think we talked about it from very early on,
Hmm.
from when we this first season, and I think we talked about this. We watched the first season shortly after arriving back in the country. We were a bit sleep deprived. We saw a tram go past with a poster for it. Never heard of Stranger Things before. There'd been no word about it. I hadn't had any like online buzz that I could recall. We went home to check out what this Netflix show was all about, and here we are 6 years later, I think. It's about 6 years later, and the train is rolling still. It's become a phenomenon. The latest season's back half of 2 episodes, I think it's 3.5 hours all up or something like that, those 2 episodes, that
Hmm.
crashed the entire Netflix service for some people. I've heard different reports. But we had sort of talked about it on this podcast as something we had a sort of qualified affection for. A couple of criticisms, and then over the years, with each season, those criticisms became more insistent.
Mm.
And one of the major issues with the last season was that it felt more and more like they were wasting the opportunity to do a show set in the 80s, and that David Harbour's character, Hopper, who was one of the most enjoyable aspects of the first season, was just increasingly being made redundant and coming off as a jerk and unlikable. So, on both of those accounts, I feel as if this season actually dealt with some of the subject matter and the referencing a little more fluidly in the last few episodes, particularly Nightmare on Elm Street and 80s horror and sort of horror and sexuality and all these issues they touched on.
Mm.
And David Harbour came off much better. He just had to
Much
suffer in
better.
a Russian gulag for. Did you realize it's apparently 8 months after season 3? It's 8 months supposedly.
And it actually took them 3 years to release it.
Yeah, and everyone's visibly aged considerably
Well,
since.
yes. If you work with actual children and teenagers, that's going to happen. They grow and develop and start to look like adults.
Hmm. So I
Um,
guess the first, again, in terms of plot, there's three storylines in it.
yes.
One involves a mysterious series of murders in the town of Hawkins that get quickly
Again,
associated with a local D&D chapter called Hellfire.
which is weird.
So it becomes a satanic panic storyline,
Yes.
being led by local jocks. The second storyline involved Joyce's attempt to rescue Hopper from Russia. And then the third storyline is mostly concerning Eleven in California and Mike going out to meet her and what happens next.
Uh-huh.
That's where we start.
I kind of love like it's probably the weakest of the plot lines, the third, where Joyce is going to rescue Hopper from the Russian gulag because even that as a sentence is just crazy. But I love this idea of this 1980s mother of teenagers who just decides. So they've moved away and she's out there selling door-to-door encyclopedias or something. Is
Yeah,
that what she's doing?
Encyclopedia
Or
Britannica
by
over the
phone?
phone. Yeah.
And she's just decided that she's gonna go and rescue her not boyfriend. Like, what even is their relationship other than the fact that she's got Elle living with her? There's actually no reason for her to go and do this other than the fact that, clearly she's in love with him and he's clearly in love with her, but that was always on ice for a while. So I just like this idea of like 1980s mom Winona Ryder deciding that she's just going to up and go to Russia and pull her non-partner out of a Russian gulag.
A Russian gulag where it turns out there are monsters, and they're experimenting on the prisoners by.
Monsters
Yeah.
who are literal monsters,
Mm.
but also the scary Russian soldiers that they have to deal with,
Mm.
who aren't particularly kind to the prisoners.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's a lot, but you're right. Whenever the action went to Russia, I felt proceedings slow down a bit, even though you had like Winona and you had Harbour and you have what's his face? Gelpin in there as well. Murray, Brett Gelpin. Yeah,
Murray.
yeah. He's a great character and he does a lot when he's on screen. But there was this sense of, well, the stakes really are back in Hawkins, and that
Very
applies
much so.
to the Californian chapter, which is more about how Eleven got her groove back, like trying to give this girl her powers so she doesn't just solve everything. But that still is like a delaying action, just that whole storyline. So yeah, it's interesting that I think right out the gate we're mentioning things we weren't entirely happy with, but I still think it was a more successful overall season than the previous two.
Yeah, I definitely the last season. I didn't think that was particularly. I really didn't like the way that they ripped into Hopper and changed his character so wholly. Given what you're telling me, the timeline of all of this is supposed to be, like he went from being a man who suffered a serious trauma, who was doing the best he could for this town, respected to a point, but scrappy children in the town doing things, um, grew into this accidental authority figure, um, with a soft side, and then they completely turned him into an asshole who was put in charge of 11, who also had a lot of goodwill towards her as a character. So it was an odd. I feel like it was kind of left of center, whereas maybe seasons 1, 2, and 4 are a bit more in line with each other in terms of tone and in terms of let let us just like some of the characters. Let us just keep some of the characters, although they tend to not do that as well. But anyway, yeah, I think it got a little bit overly complicated and probably could have done with maybe 2 of the plot lines as opposed to 3 because things are just going to suffer. And the real plot line really is the first plot line, the main plot line, which is taking place in Hawkins, where you've still got a number of the characters still going to school. And they, as you said, they joined the Dungeons and Dragons group, led by Eddie Munson, who is a very cool dude. But I don't. It's funny because the problem that I have with that plot line is that I don't understand how this jock made the leap to say that this Dungeons and Dragons metal listening to rocking kind of 80s stereotype is somehow the leader of this satanic group that is out there
Wow. Okay, that was
abhorrently
that was
killing people.
instantly familiar to me. That was instantly familiar to me. I remember,
Really?
yeah, I remember growing up in Rathcoole, rocker kids were automatically called Satanists. Like that was the whole thing. And then,
Yeah,
there
but
are,
you grew up in Catholic Ireland.
yes, and this is
Rock
Midlands.
and roll is the devil's work.
Yeah, and this is 1980s America, which is in the throes of satanic panic at this very time where they set in the show. This is where you have all the stories about secret Satanists and ritual abuse and all this stuff going on in the media. And talk show hosts are talking about, oh, there's witches kidnapping your children. All that's
But
happening.
okay, but like you're talking about a teenager in a town where a bunch of stuff is going on, horribly killing people. Like it's the kind of stuff that you couldn't do as an individual. And this guy is just gone completely bananas and decided that. But then that's the thing as well. Like it's there again. What's the character's name? Mason. Of course
Yes.
it is. On this vendetta against Eddie, and I found him strange how the times where he pops up and just his intensity
Hmm.
is just nuts.
He's got a
For a
double
guy who's
mander
a
to him.
jock,
He's got that sort of blonde Aryan
he's
mensch
just
thing going on.
a little bit insane. Like
Hmm.
that's well, I guess that as you say, like that's a commentary on
Hmm.
how the normal the jock, the guy you're supposed to aspire to, is not necessarily right
I mean,
right in the head. This one.
I welcomed that storyline, but also it was incredibly on the line, on the nose, when Lucas almost says word for word what you just said. Like, word for word says to Jason, I thought I wanted to be you, but no, you're a monster.
He is a monster, and I think it actually speaks really well to which is not a compliment to the state of the world. But there are Karens, and like he's an extreme Karen, and your gun-toting Christian white person who's decided that this is the bad thing, and I'm going to go after it with everything that I have, because it's just it goes from like zero to ridiculous. His intensity over this whole situation and what he's decided that he's going to do about it, and it's pretty horrible. Not to say the way that Chrissy was killed is pretty horrible. Actually, that's probably something I would say about this. I think I feel like the previous Stranger Things were slightly less horror, different kind of horror, a lot of monstery horror. Whereas this one, you've got a bit more of the body horror thing coming into it with the cracking of bones and the twisting of bodies and stuff like that. And
And
it's
eyeballs, don't forget eyeballs, that's my thing.
it's quite intense from quite early on. So I feel like that was an escalation, but also a movement into a different kind of 80s horror.
Yeah, I'm dipping into the second season of The Witcher in your absence, because I might as well watch this bloody thing. And uh, similar to the episode of Stranger Things where we had the Robert Englund character's flashback to the wartime atrocities he committed. Can we stop with babies being burnt in cribs, please? Can we stop doing that? Like, Witcher had it too, and I was going, Game of Thrones, I think, really cracked the seal in that. Yeah, we'll kill a baby on camera, sure. We'll totally do that. It really is horrible to watch, and the escalation of horror in this season of Stranger Things, it got to a point where I was starting to say, I think the Nightmare on Elm Street movies had a point. There was usually a point, or there was some significance to the imagery. Whereas with this, I was going, okay, you're just shocking me now. Like, why did this happen? You certainly framed it in a way that I'm just feeling disgust, not fear or trauma. I'm feeling just revulsion at what I'm watching. I think the Duffer Brothers have talked about how when they worked with the actor Jamie Campbell Bower, they went over a lot of with him. Apparently, Hellraiser was one of the source texts they used for his character, and I can see that. Again,
Yeah.
I can see the sadism. Certainly, the deaths are sadistic, and there's lots of him playing with his food going on. And that's scary, but I think they don't have. I wouldn't call it lightness of touch, but they don't have the exactness of a Barker. They don't have the body horror excitement of a Cronenberg. It's sort of like just things
No,
happen,
it doesn't.
you know? And there's an artlessness to it, which I think the actors do a lot to lift the material. Like Sadie Sink's scenes with Vecna. Her whole storyline's
She's great.
amazing. As Max, she really smacked it out of the park in this season.
And that's where I think that Hawkins, I was going to say timeline. We're not talking about metaverses and timelines and stuff like that. That's a whole other conversation about a whole other film that we recently saw. We're talking about plot lines, but I think that was the strongest in terms of the stakes, in terms of the character development, because we actually got a new character there who, by the end, I think a lot of people were pissed off with what happened because they made us feels, because they created a good and interesting and empathic character who, that last episode where it's I don't want to run, I want to be the hero, be a hero. Oh, that was a lot. Also playing electric guitar in the what do they call, what is it, the upside down? In the upside down. Sure, why not?
Screw it, we're doing.
Just try to, how epic can you possibly make this character?
Yeah, apparently Metallica very
I
happy.
think that's the strongest plot line. But I felt a lot from number one gave me Alex from A Clockwork Orange vibe. But the restrained part of Alex, where he could go off at any second, and it's that line between control and, I don't want to say not control, because like it's a controlled madness and anger and destruction and violence, and so I that kind of, that pasty white face and that serious conversation, and I'm going to try and get you over to my side of the fence, when actually it sounds convincing, but is it convincing? Is it the right way to be? So I found that performance a good performance, but I felt like that whole section with 11 trying to rediscover her powers, and sometimes she was good and sometimes she was not good, so sometimes she was strong and sometimes she was not strong, and the inconsistency about how that works and what that meant was it was lengthy. I felt those were some of the times that it really dragged, because it was just you're going over the same material, you're rehashing the same stuff over and over again. Yes, you're developing it, but it's so slow that the other pieces were moving at such a high pace and with higher stakes, that I felt that you probably could have lost half of that. You really only needed mostly the component of 11 towards the end, when she starts talking to Max and she's present with Max and what's going on there, and her to somehow get her confidence prior to that and her powers back prior to that. But it didn't need to be however many episodes this thing is. Like, I think it's like 10 hours long. There was a strong component in there, and I think that's really that section of the storyline is also pretty hard to take in ways, because you're talking about, let's not burn babies in cribs. Well, this is violence against children. The experimentation that they were doing on these children is pretty not nice, actually. And I think it dwells a little bit too long on that. Whereas I think when we had 11 being rescued from this and then finally finding her family, at least there was some redemption for that situation. Whereas now she's hurled back into it. There are other children involved. Some are quite young. It's actually a lot. So it's kind of like, you've got, on the one hand, you've got this body horror stuff going on, you've got the grossness, you've got violence, and then you've got the psychological stuff as well. And like, at what point is the pylon just too much? I guess that's where maybe the Russian scenes with Hopper and Joyce and Murray were supposed to be light relief, to kind of,
Yeah,
give us a relax for a moment. Whereas but they were still quite serious and horrible in a different way.
Sure, or Jonathan Byers and his whole sort of stoner shtick. Which
I don't like him.
It wasn't
at
funny.
All. He's no. Or his mate. That was just
Argyle.
Again, it's super anybody who grew up through this era will recognize that character, recognize the character of the pizza friend who's the stoner, the road trip, all of that kind of stuff. But even that, I didn't feel that was built strongly, because that's the plot line that involves 11. So a lot of that then deferred to 11. Meanwhile, allegedly, they're somehow driving across, they're trying to get out and get back to Hawkins so that they can help. There's no communication between anybody at this point. They think Joyce has gone off on some retreat for her encyclopedia job. She's in Russia trying to save Hopper. It's all a bit messed up. I just wish they kind of focused more heavily on what was happening in Hawkins. That's the piece that was really compelling for me. And I think the performances in there were higher than the other plot lines.
Yeah.
And I also, no, go ahead.
No, please.
I don't really know where I was going.
That's okay. No, I think you're right. I mean, the Hawkins material was the prime beef, and it sort of speaks to the size of the cast as well, that we've got so many characters now that we keep needing to touch base with, and it's like, they can just go away for a summer and you can just concentrate on these characters now that you've established them.
Yeah.
And if you don't have anything really to do with Will, for example, if you don't really have much for him to do, give the character a break.
I kind of think Will is important.
Will's hugely important, but they're not. He's been on the bench for 3 seasons now.
I think the problem with what they've done with Will is, you're right, they've buried him under a number of other characters that are unnecessary. And then they add in new characters like Eddie, who we then fall in love with. But they did it last time as well. So they did it with Robin. Robin didn't need to be in this. She could have just been in the other one and could have, just been Steve's friend who was working in the ice cream shop, and they had that situation. And she's like, no, I'm checking out of this situation.
I've specifically listed like a couple of things that I loved, and one of them was circled Maya Hawke. That was one of the specific things.
No. So this is my problem, is that I think she's great. I love the way she plays that character, because she's not stupid, but she kind of thinks she's stupid or acts stupid, or something has clearly happened to her where she doesn't trust her own vibe. But she's got a great vibe, and she's great up against Joe Keery as Steve. Like, the two of them are really good, but they were so good in the last season that chucked up against everybody else in this season, you're kind of losing that, and it kind of is a little bit annoying, especially with her up against Natalie Dyer as Nancy Wheeler, who, she is the one who's supposed to be the bright spark and all the rest of it, and she's like super serious in this. And the thing that I will comment on is her perm in this is amazing, because it goes from, in the beginning, she's all put together and she's the editor of the newspaper, and she's, got it all sorted, and then she has to go into like, I don't have time to style my perm and set my perm. She's just got to get on with it and start fighting monsters and work out what the bloody hell is going on. I understand what they were trying to do there, but I think when you've got too many characters who are trying to fill different roles, and you need a serious one, you need a not so serious one, you need a funny one, you need a stupid one, you need one to play specific roles in order to carry the story, while you're throwing all these horrible things at them. That's where the balance is going to be. But when you're talking about all these different characters trying to compete for airtime and trying to do their thing, this is where I'm actually surprised that they managed to create a new character with such like success in amongst all of these other characters, which I think again then speaks to the performance.
Yeah, it's the performance, and also I think there's been okay. I really want to talk about. I want to follow this conversation where it's going, but one thing that I'm fascinated with since we finished watching it is the fan reaction to this show. And one of the things that the fans have jumped on is, there was an interview recently, or I think it might have been even a Twitter account for the Stranger Things writers. They may have said something to the effect of, in this scene, the actors improvised it. In this scene, the actors improvised it. In this scene, the actors improvised it. And one of the scenes in question, okay, so Hopper and Joyce kissing was improvised by Winona Ryder and David Harbour. They just decided their characters should kiss. And that,
you can kind of tell.
And that's a natural moment, but it wasn't written that way. Caleb as Lucas shouting for Erica to call an ambulance towards the end, that was improvised. Like his heartbreak, the way he plays that scene. That's him in that moment. Caleb McLaughlin, isn't it? Anyway, and Joseph Quinn's Eddie. So there's a moment where Quinn is playing Eddie and he's hot wiring a camper van, and Joe Keery's beside him. and clearly they had a
Mm.
rapport. And Maya Hawke is
Mm.
also there in shot, and he's like, I don't think we should be stealing this car. He says, no, I'm just gonna hotwire. I'm gonna get it started. You're gonna drive her. And then he rounds it off with, aren't you, big boy? And he just that little, and there's a sort of like chaotic bisexual glint in his eye, and
Mhm.
all of the Tumblr people are like seizing on that moment and saying,
Oh God.
"Oh my God, he's amazing! Look at him! Look at this perfect person." But then he also had a scene with the actor playing Chrissy, Grace Van Dyne, and their
Hmm.
scene together, where in the meeting in the park, was filmed after Chrissy's death scene. So they're
Hmm.
filming that afterwards, and they just started vibing. So a lot of that stuff on camera with them is them just like playing off one
I
another.
kind of like that. I like the way they interact because it's you sometimes have to interact with someone who you're like, I never,
Yeah,
never would ordinarily interact with this person, and you actually do vibe with them, and you're like, okay, you're
it's
cool, and then you're just gonna go back to your separate sides of the fence.
there's a script there that they're
And
working with. The fact that these characters knew each other when they were younger, that's in the script, but they play it in a
mm,
way that just played to the strengths of these actors and their natural
mm,
chemistry with one another, and the fact that they look great on camera. And again, the Duffers were saying, "Oh shit, we shouldn't have killed off Chrissy because they got something. We needed more scenes like this." And again, the fans are going, well, then that's bad writing. Now, I think there's a
no, not
danger. No, it's
necessarily.
not necessarily, but there's a danger with like things like fan canon where you're in a sort of bubble and you're not actually looking at things objectively. But I do think there is
Mm.
something to the fact that these performers know these characters so well, or feel a moment and are lifting the material, and that's starting to show up the writing a bit. That is a factor.
I think that's an interesting point, but I think it's also difficult if you've come up with this concept that you've then written that has three streams of consciousness that are all supposed to at some point interweave with each other. You've got a host of characters that you've decided are legacy characters that you're going to keep. You're going to add some new vibes for this one. Why? You've got people from not just the beginning, but the middle and then now. It would be very difficult then to have really great performers come in, and you want good performers, but to come in and then change that. Like, how do you alter that? Especially given, that some of this was shot during COVID time. Well, it was all shot during COVID times. Um, what's his face? The brother, whose name I've
Dacre
forgotten.
Montgomery, he was in Perth, you were saying.
Yes,
Yeah.
I believe he recorded his scenes completely not anywhere near the rest of the cast, but in a studio in Australia somewhere, I think Perth. Um, and that's just what you had to do to get this done. So I think the challenge is to write in a way that it gives your performers enough to know their characters to be able to do the vibing. But I don't necessarily think that then killing off Chrissy was a bad thing. But because you would just then have another Eddie and Chrissy versus like Steve and Robin. Is it just the same dynamic that you see again if we saw it for a more prolonged period of time? The problem that I have is with her boyfriend, who I don't understand how he just, again, like I said before, he's gone from 0 to 100 in terms of she's died in horrible circumstances. It's pretty bad. Immediately blame this guy and somehow convince people that he's part of a satanic cult, or
Mm.
really it's him and his vigilante mate.
Mm.
Because it doesn't seem to be like until towards the end there's a news report and you're like, WTF, like how fake news. Fake news back in the 80s. It was totally there then. The reason we care she died is because it was freaking horrible, and that's not quite what we're expecting. Crap. This is upping the breaking of bones and horribleness of. Didn't like that.
Yeah, the
Um,
Satanic Panic
yeah.
thing, I was trying to remember a particular source text for that period, because as I said, it's something I'm very familiar with.
I
But
know, like I understand
sure.
the concept of it and that happened, and but I feel like it's almost like you need to have a Christian group behind him or
Well, he is
something.
normal, so by definition, he's Christian. So he's representing the community, and he's been appointed as a football player, as the voice of that community, which, is something we saw in Dazed and Confused as well. This idea of the football player somehow being this really important totemic character for a community.
Yeah,
So he's been given this role, and he's seized it with both hands, and he starts
but I
channeling
feel
this
like
Satanic Panic stuff. But the book I was trying to remember. Well, funny I should say that. The book I was trying to remember was Michelle Remembers, which was a psychiatrist talking about a young girl having recovered memories of satanic abuse, and that a whole bunch of crap. Show touching on that, and there's just this accepted wisdom that the suburbs were stuffed full of Satanists, so that, as you say, at the end of the show, where there's a newsreader on camera saying this massive event which taking place was probably connected to some Satanist group, that passes muster.
that
That's
was
actually
one guy. Like this is the problem that I have with it. I feel like what did I decide his name was?
Jason.
Jason. Jason, the most 80s name. Um, Jason, I feel like he would have rallied a pitchfork burning group behind him, and he didn't do that. And I feel like it's also that contrast between, as you say, he's a football player, he's the jock, he's the popular one, he clearly comes from money, and then you've got Eddie who is on the outside, he is into his D&D, he's into his metal music, and yes, okay, there are tinges of ideas that are satanic or magic or what have you that sits within that space. But he's also poor and he also has no parents. He seems to have an uncle who we don't really see a lot of. He lives in a trailer, which is where Max knows him because Max lives in a trailer with her mom. Um, and they know him from school also. So he's like just doing the best with the situation that he has. And he's a bit down on his luck, and that kind of speaks to his attitude and then makes you really sad at the end. Um,
But he also has,
so that could have been drawn on a bit better as well, I think.
and Joseph Quinn sort of is introduced to us as Eddie as this manic character, and I found him incredibly
Yeah.
off-putting. And then,
Did you?
yeah. Initially, I found him incredibly off-putting, and then through Erica and Chrissy, through his interactions with
Hmm.
these two young women, you see that he actually regards himself as a carer almost. Like he's trying to look
Yeah.
out for the people who have been discarded. And he's got this defensive aspect to him because the norms have rejected him for most of his life. So when he identifies that you are an outsider like him, he fixes on you and he's like, all right, I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to make sure you're okay. And at the end, when he's talking to Dustin, that's the charge he passes on to Dustin, which is take care of them, take care of the ones who've been excluded. Like that's kind of beautiful. And that's the thing that Jason isn't interested in. Jason's interested in excluding. He's interested in appealing to the mob and targeting
But
minorities.
that's the problem, though. He doesn't do that. He doesn't go as far as I think he should have. And I feel like because of that, he's a weak villain. He's I think they could have done more with his character. And I wonder if it's because it was just so packed in that they didn't have time or whether there was something different. Because I also feel like you're right, his Eddie's relationship with Dustin towards the end, I'm like, did we miss something? Because I feel like that should have been baited a bit. Baited, is that the word I'm looking for? Seeded is the word I'm looking for. Seeded a little bit earlier. So I know he went along to the Hellfire Club and that all happened, but I feel like they seem to just have some special connection towards the end. That I feel like we kind of missed something.
Well,
But
like
I could
Dustin was
have
like
just
the
been me.
adopted child of Eddie and Steve, and again, this is where the Tumblr people need to calm down with the bisexual fanfic. But anyway, I feel as if Dustin really looked up to Steve previously, and then in this scene,
Yes.
he's giving him a bit of back talk. And then there's a scene where Eddie's talking to Steve, and Eddie says, no, he loves you. He really looks up to you, and he talks about you all the time when we're playing D&D. And I was hearing all these stories
Mm.
about this jock, this handsome, wealthy jock who's apparently cool, and I did not believe them because that doesn't happen. People like you don't exist. But turns out you are actually pretty cool, and I'm kind of jealous of you that you Dustin looks up to you so much, and Steve's like, oh wow, he likes me. Like, so there's
That's true.
there's a transference from Steve to Eddie that's happening as well. Like Dustin's looking up to Eddie in a way that maybe he once glommed onto Steve, but he still holds them.
Maybe.
He holds them both in very high esteem, and that's how we as the audience know. Oh, Steve and Eddie are both good people because Dustin likes
Hmm.
them.
Hmm.
Dustin's got good instincts.
That's pretty true.
Hmm.
Um, I think we probably need to touch on Sadie Sink's performance. I think she was outstanding here as Max. She does a great job. She is the poor girl who needs to listen to Running Up the Hill over and over and over again. Kate Bush having a resurgence, and now everybody on TikTok and Instagram is listening to Running Up that Hill over and over
I
again. By
think
the
she's
way, there's
made,
a whole back catalogue of Kate Bush songs out
yeah,
there that you can probably have a listen
the
to.
song
Check
where
it
she
out, just not the one song.
the song where she sings the sequence of Pi was a particular favorite of mine about 15 years ago. Yeah, no, she's made about 2.3 million from streams alone, I believe, because she
Amazing.
has the
That's
production
great.
rights. Yeah, so she's pocketing
Clever
that too
girl.
much. Yeah.
So good on the world for rediscovering Kate Bush. But oh my God, I'm over that song. But no, she does a great job. I think her character has a little more depth than some of the others, despite the fact that they've all been through these significant traumas. She went through trauma in her life prior to coming together with this group of people who seem to be constantly battling demons, literal demons, as opposed to metaphorical ones. So she's got a lot to her, and she has to go through a lot to progress this storyline. And I think she does it with, for a young actor, so much control in her performance and so much um like there's a lot of maturity in her performance for a young person who at the same time is trying to play a young person in a relatively uninformed time. Like, you have to remember, young people these days come across as quite adult because they are surrounded by information and media and concepts of popularity and Instagram and Facebook and all those sorts of things. Whereas back in the day, there was a lot more opportunity to just be a kid. But because of her life circumstances and what happened with her brother and the fact that her brother was a bully, not only to everybody else, but to her, she's gone through a lot prior to that. So there's a maturity in her character and the way that she plays that. And I think she's a really strong performer. And I think she's the standout in this season. I think Natalie Dyer does a good job with Nancy, although Nancy annoys the shit out of me. She and again, I think it's difficult for her in this one because she's surrounded by Maya Hawke as Robin and then Joe Keery as Steve, and she has to compete with all of that to then have her character push through. But she's the natural leader of the lot of them, and it while I think she's happy to do it, it also probably weighs on her a little bit as well because, and I really just wish that they would not have her and Jonathan still being a thing, because like it's clear it came close to them almost not being by the end of it, like, because Nancy is like just power. She's going to be wearing power suits in the 90s. She's going to be into it, whereas Jonathan, like, the whole point was that he wasn't an idiot, and then he's kind of gone off the rails and decided to be a stoner. And I thought they would have gotten over that by now, but he's still, apparently that's still what he's doing. And then, they have that brief conversation about going to college, and of course he hasn't got his college letter because they are on different tracks in life, but keep trying to hammer this dead horse.
Okay, a couple of
Yeah,
points.
that annoys
A
me.
couple of points. The Nancy,
Oh
the
no.
Nancy question.
Emmett is waving a pen at me.
I am talking down to you like Bernie Sanders talked down to Hillary Clinton.
No. No.
No. Just I find Nancy an interesting character. I think she was poorly used for the couple of seasons as well. I feel like you're right, she's grabbed back something. But I feel as if when she was with Robin, that lifted the character well. Maya Hawke,
Yeah, correct.
when they're together, their chemistry actually helped scenes just zoom by. Um, she's got two men in her life, Jonathan and Steve, and I thought Steve had improved and he was being a little cooler, but she's got Jonathan who is completely unambitious and I think is traumatized, but he's not talking to anyone about it. So
Definitely. He definitely is.
he needs to be there for his brother. That's who he needs to be there for. And we got crumbs of that, but I think we needed more. And then she's
Yeah.
got Steve, who it turns out wants to pump a bunch of kids in her. Like that scene, that supposedly romantic
Don't go too
scene
far.
where he talks about his vision of a future. I was going, this is horrifying. No, no, don't do that to the poor girl. What are you talking about? And
Nope.
people are talking about that scene as if, Nancy's looking at Steve as if to consider him as a prospect. And I was going, I don't know, man. I thought she was looking at him a bit nonplussed, like, you want to do what to my vagina? What? No, thank you. So I
No.
hope she cuts both of them off and does her own thing.
True, yeah, that's what she will do. That's, alternate Nancy is she's off doing her own thing, and she'll come back to like a high school reunion and be like, I'm the editor of a fashion magazine, because that's what everybody wanted to do back in the day. I don't know. As in Devil Wears Prada kind of situation, but happy. I don't know. I'm making stuff up.
Yeah.
She's gonna go be a lawyer in the city.
She's gonna run Starbucks. Like all of the Starbucks.
No!
Yeah, she'll totally
No,
she'll sell out. She'll sell out straight away. First chance she gets.
No. She's got morals.
That's what people who've got morals do. They
Sell
sell out.
for money. That's kind of true. So yes, those are important performances and characters. I'm kind of over Finn Wolfhard and Mike. I'm just like, we got it. Mike was important in the first season. I think we've moved on from his necessity as part of this. Dustin will always be important to all of us. Caleb McLaughlin as Lucas was very good.
They give him more to do, thank
because
God.
he plays along. They gave him more to do, and it was interesting because I almost didn't recognize him. He's one of the characters. He's one of the actors who was like sprung. He just turned into a weed and grew. But I think because he plays well off Sadie Sink, the two of them play together really well. And again, the two of them have quite a growth to go through in this season. And again, given the amount that they've chucked into this thing, it's amazing that they're actually able to do that. And I actually still think that Will is an important character here. And of course, they hammer it home at the end. He went through the upside down, and clearly he's got leftover feels, literal feels, as in chicken. What do you call them? Chicken bumps.
Mm-hmm. Goose pimples.
What do you call them?
Goose pimples.
Goose pimples. Goose bumps. Chicken bumps. Oh my God, what am I talking about? The feelings of Hawkins, and being back there is not comfortable for him. And the implication that he is gay and in love with Mike, which I find a really interesting way they've chosen to do that, because I feel like the time that we're talking about a period where, AIDS was death, and AIDS was associated with gay men, and it was not a positive period of time. And Mike is, he's a boy. He's a boy's boy. He's out there being a boy, and there is the risk that if Will tells Mike how he feels, he's going to lose his best mate forever. He's going to be ostracized, but also more broadly ostracized. This is his best mate. He went through literal hell of an experience with him. Elle is in a relationship with Mike, Will. They're just short names and they get kind of swirled around in my brain. And she's important to Will. So it's his life is wrapped up with these other characters and this friendship group. So for him to be having an experience outside of inverted commas normal, in what is actually very abnormal circumstances, is a really interesting way, because I think a lot of people are probably annoyed at the fact that, he's not saying anything, he's not doing anything. You have to remember that this is a very different time. And he probably can't. He probably can't. He can't say anything. He can't do anything. It's just, wide-eyed gazing. And there is a little speech that is clearly intended from Will's perspective, but he says it from Elle's perspective, and that's heartbreaking. But I don't know that they could have done it any other way. But that, I think, kind of makes Will look like a weaker character in the scheme of this, and he does kind of get lost. But I don't think that's his characterization. I don't think that's the performance. I think that's just the fact that the whole thing is loaded with too much else, that when he actually has a moment, he's good at it and he's strong, but for the fact that it gets drowned out by everything else.
Yeah, it sort of shows up. I mean, I had written in a note, can we stop at Finn Wolfhard, please? Like just in terms of,
He's just a bit much. And I'm like, it's not all about you.
Yeah.
Like
he's got main character syndrome, and it's like you haven't been the main character in 3 seasons. Like,
no.
But like the character clearly is still central through the relationship with Eleven at the very least. But the actor as well, I kind of feel as if he's had so much screen time, and I'm glad that
a little bit of saturation.
Yeah, and with It as well, the It movies, and he's done a bunch of other things too. But like, I think the other actors all are delivering so well on screen. Like, they're doing such a good job.
Yeah.
And Millie Bobby Brown and Finn Wolfhard were I think 2 that were plucked out early. They got a lot of attention. And it feels as if some of the other actors, Sadie Sink in particular, is getting a lot of notice now, are advancing, if not outdistancing them. And I find that interesting. And I think maybe a little more equitable distribution of storylines for individual actors. If you're going to have this cast, then treat them as equal partners in the storytelling and not sort of background until you need someone to deliver a speech. The speeches, dear God, the speeches. It really got to me towards the end. It really started to hurt my brain. I was like, just come on, speed it up, guys. Come on, let's go. Because part of the problem I have with the speeches is so much of them are loaded with these emotional moments which are meant to be emotional, where people don't speak. So they sort of stop and wait, and we're supposed to be on the other side of the screen crying or whatever. Like, come on, say it. Just deliver the key piece of information.
Spit it out.
And again, the actors are doing such a great job that you're still in the moment, but like you start to notice how stodgy the language of their scenes are. And again, I put that down to the writing. And did this need to be 2.5 hours of stuff, that last episode? Did it need to be that long? I don't know if it did. I do wonder if a lot of this actually is a business model decision that relates to Netflix. Netflix knows that subscriptions go up when Stranger Things is on. So they kept it going to the point where you need to renew your subscription. And it worked. They crashed the service. They clearly have had a popular hit. And it's beaten Obi-Wan. It's beaten Miss Marvel. It may have I think it's beaten The Boys. Like all the other Disney Plus, Prime, all these other channels are not keeping pace with Stranger Things. But once Stranger Things is gone, well, why keep subscribing to Netflix? And I guess that's a conversation we should have. Household budget. Do we need all these streaming services?
Well, that's true.
I wonder how many of these story issues that we're having aren't actually down to the vision of the writers and are instead business decisions on the part of the platform they're on.
There's clearly it's clearly cash cow. There's clearly the way they've created the story. I feel like you could have quite easily dropped off some of the characters, but they've chosen not to do that, which will lengthen the series. And you can make more Funko Pops and Legos and whatever other marketing materials that you want out of these things. Does the story suffer because of it? Yes, I think it does. Do the performances suffer? Yes, not at the fault of the actors, but at the fault of the fact that, as I said before, it is just chock full of stuff. You have to switch from this, that to the other. You're literally following three read, this episode is by this person, this episode is from this person's perspective, or what have you, and it's the same story but told from different areas, which could have been a way to do this, and maintain all the different characters. It's literally three different things that are going on, and I kind of forgot that they were driving across the desert. I forgot that was happening. I forgot, they were trying to get somewhere. I'm like, oh yeah, Ella's back in this thing, and I'm like, wait, they're coming to get her. I forgot about that completely until helicopters are crashing and stuff is going on. Yeah, as I said before, the most compelling storyline was the one that was still in Hawkins. I like David Harbour and probably would watch him do basically anything. So I quite enjoyed that component, but it didn't make a lot of sense. I actually thought that they were going to run back through the upside down. Why do I keep going to the underground? The upside down from Russia to America back to Hawkins,
yeah,
and they didn't do that.
Why does geography have to work in the same way? Like, if you've got these two...
Well, it kind of does, because they've kind of established that. So the top is the same as the bottom, but murky.
The top is the same at the bottom at the point where you enter the upside down, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the...
But then there's all weird stuff going on, so yeah, correct, you're probably right.
I thought the point was that wherever there was a portal, it started replicating what was on the other side of that portal in this place, which is empty of anything. It's a limbo.
Yeah.
And so I thought what they were going to do was, actually, if we go through here and we just march in that direction, we'll hit Hawkins because it's the only other physical place here. Like, there's nothing else. It's not a place.
Yeah. That's kind of what I thought was going to happen.
Yeah, but you're right. I mean, then they decided to get in a helicopter and a bunch of stuff happened off screen that we didn't see. It was kind of annoying. And then, it's incredible that, again, reading fans talk about the show, which I'm actually getting more enjoyment out of than perhaps watching the show. People are demanding, where was Mr. Clark? So that's Scott Clark. That he was the science teacher played by Randy Havens. He had a couple of memorable scenes where he was like their early mentor of the boys in terms of giving them some scientific tidbits to help them understand the Upside Down. He doesn't appear in this season, and I find it amazing that people are complaining that people aren't appearing. With there's so many people there.
With there's so many.
Did we need to see Billy again?
No,
we didn't need to.
I don't think you needed to.
I mean, it was good to see him.
No.
I like to see the actor. I'm happy he's got a career, but like it was kind of. Why
but
are
I
you
don't
here?
actually think he added anything.
No.
Like I think we could have just dealt with Max's trauma.
Yeah, you wanted your brother to die because he bullied you, and she's going, "No, I didn't." And Vecna's like, "Yeah, you did," and she's, "Yeah, I did." And like that's powerful enough by itself. His absence makes it powerful because then you're talking about somebody who's dead. They don't come back.
That's it. They don't come back. You don't get to have an apology conversation. It's done. It's over. They're gone. And it's also her dealing with the fact that she wanted something horrible to happen because it's not right to her. And then how do you balance that guilt with actually this is going to fix my situation? So that, there's a lot in Max's character. But yes, I feel like it was overstuffed. I feel like we should lose some of the characters. I understand that there's a lot. I think you're 100% correct in terms of why we've still got Finn Wolfhard in this show, why we've still got Charlie Heaton in this show. It's because they were there in the beginning. They were instrumental in the beginning. And actually, I don't think they contribute terribly much anymore. Yeah, I think that's about all I have to say. I'm sure there was plenty more that I was thinking, but I think we've covered off a lot.
Yeah.
Do people like it or no? What's the general consensus? People are going to whinge about it? Well, of course.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting. What I can gather is that, okay, we were all so wrapped up in this show when they had that cliffhanger end, and I think there was a degree of positive goodwill towards the show, saying, oh, it's recovered some lost ground, it's definitely on a track now, it seems to be going towards a definite conclusion. And one viral phrase that we both heard was, if Steve dies, we riot. In fact, that Netflix actually had marketing materials, if Steve dies, we riot, which is a rehash of the Walking Dead campaign for Daryl. Like, if Daryl dies, we riot is like a recurring thing The Walking Dead fans said when that show was popular. So even that is Stranger Things is rehashing something from before.
Yep.
But yeah, I think there was a lot of goodwill towards the show. It was great to see the actors all back again, and the Kate Bush moment was very emotional for a lot of people. Spoilers for folks who haven't watched Stranger Things season 4, but like you've listened to us talk for almost an hour about this. We're going to drop some things, so you can jump off now. We're coming towards the end of the discussion. People are pissed about Eddie dying. They are pissed about Eddie dying. They're so mad.
It was really sad.
So mad.
It was really
And there's a
sad.
bait and
It was
switch
really
because
sad.
everyone thought it was going to be
really
Steve.
sad. It was really
and it
sad.
was Eddie. Eddie dies. This guy we just met. And
See, I told you, they did too good of a job with this character.
the actor
and
did too good
the
of a
portrayal,
job.
and
He didn't know what was going to happen. So he just made sure that whenever scene he was in, he was on. Like, that's why he's so over the top, because the actor's like going, oh, I got to make this guy memorable. So he's doing a lot. Joseph Quinn is doing a lot. He's playing with the scenes. He's playing with the scene partners. He's really juicing every moment Eddie's on screen. And then you've got this conclusion for him. And the actors talked about it saying, oh, I thought when I booked it, I do a good job. Maybe they'll have me back for a couple of seasons, Dacre Montgomery's dead. They keep bringing him back. And Matthew Modine's dead. They keep bringing him back. So there was a sense of, oh, this is gonna be my ticket, and then it's like, oh, that's it, I'm done. Oh no. And again, there is this feeling that, well, if you've got this actor and this character who has this goodwill, you've got this outsider perspective, you've got the Tumblr bisexuals lusting after him. You've got the D&D set loving him. You've got the metalheads love him. All these outsider groups converging on this one character and seeing him as this totemic figure and going, this is our guy. You kill him off in a way which story-wise doesn't seem to actually matter at all, beyond his arc of I didn't run. But he also said in the D&D game at the start of the show to Dustin and Erica, that great scene where they're fighting Vecna, he says to them, sometimes you should run. It's the smarter choice. And they didn't do enough to justify that flip. He keeps talking about why he doesn't like to run. He feels he's a coward because he let Chrissy die. But he was outclassed. He was a bard up against the big bad.
But also,
his spell slots were
you
gone.
just walk around calling someone a dick doesn't work. Just tell Vecna he's a jerk. But also, I think I understand his perspective, because what he actually sees around him is these kids who have done it before, and they're going hell for leather to try and make this thing work and to actually, have a chance. So I think his whole perspective is he didn't run because if they had failed, then the whole thing would have failed and others would have perished. So he perishes himself, which is really actually fucking tragic and sad.
And the thing is,
you're exactly right, because we invest in this character, and it's just the way they do it. It was heartbreaking.
They do fail, though. That's the other thing. That's the other reason people.
That's the thing,
they're
though.
Unhappy because they do fail. They lose. Vecna wins, and
which is so it's completely unclear exactly what's going to happen next, because it's not resolved. And again, 10 hours to not resolve anything other than the fact that they're all now back together in Hawkins.
I can see how, I don't want to backseat writer this, but I can see a route through these events as they happened that actually makes some sense. I can see some groundwork you can do to get there, but I don't think enough was done. And despite the actors really selling those moments, and Joseph Quinn really selling that last death scene, or doing his best to, ultimately you've got him dying fighting these vampire bat things, and then something happens elsewhere and they all just drop dead. He dies. Dustin and the kids somehow make it back to the real world. We don't know how they did, but that doesn't seem to matter. Because everything's gone kablooey. The portals have now exploded. So how did they actually cross?
Yeah.
People are unhappy about this because they feel you were going up and up, and then there's just this crash in the last few moments of the show.
Yeah.
And that's where you're getting a fan response.
But I kind of like I understand that perspective, and yes, it was kind of annoying at the time. But then I actually, and it's set up for the next season,
Sure,
of course.
it's cliffhanger.
And it's a rush to the end, and everything happens in the last 5 minutes of 10 hours. Last 5 minutes, that's all you need to watch. But I actually kind of didn't mind that because I feel like it resets the rules in a way that is hectic. And I feel like the Upside Down needs to be hectic. And I know there's a lot of people who are drawing like, here's season one. This is the channel that we got through to get to season four. And this is the constant track that we've been on. And here's clock sounds and here's this, that, and the other. I actually don't think the Duffer Brothers are that consistent in what they do. They seem to just pick up the pen and go forward to the point where I think there was something about Will's
They forgot his
birthday,
birthday.
maybe?
Yeah.
They forgot his birthday, and then occurrences happen on the same date. They somehow magically, out of thin air, picked the same date. Out of all the days of the year, you picked the same day. So it's clearly meaningful to somebody somewhere outside of the realm of Stranger Things. But I think there is a limit to the consistency that they're interested in, and I kind of respect that in a way. Like, just fuck it and do something else. And I also don't really think that the Upside Down should have rules, especially if we're now kind of given to understand that it actually functions at the will of potentially 11, one, Vecna, and people are jerks, and people change their mind all the fucking time, and the rules change all the time, and if you've been through this intense, weird, traumatic period, you've had people doing tests on you, you're a lab rat, that's horrible. Yeah, you're gonna be fucked up. So
I wonder if you've
change the rules, but I don't know. They might in the next one.
I think you've just predicted the ending of the show.
What?
Well, you just said that 1 and 11 can both affect the Upside Down. They can both, because it's psychoactive. It responds to them.
Yeah.
Vecna, Henry 1 was traumatized, malicious, evil. He killed his own family. He was then beaten and used by Matthew Modine's character, and then he killed all those kids in response, in retaliation. So he's full of vengeance. So he created a place of nightmares. That's what he would create.
Which is of comfort to him.
Which is his lashing out at the world and existence.
Yeah.
What if 11 fills it with love? What if 11 makes it a place of love and friendship and goodness and all these characters who...
I feel like this is an episode of the Care Bears.
Yeah.
Where like there's a bunch of grey stuff over here and they're all fun and colourful and they're like, and it all turns really happy and nice, and that's what Elle's going to do.
This season was all...
That was the 80s people.
Yeah, I was just going to say this season was all Nightmare on Elm Street. The next season could be that Care Bears movie with the evil book that traumatized me as a kid. Maybe that's what it will be. But no, I'm just saying maybe that's where they're ultimately going. The theme is love and acceptance, and that the Upside Down becomes this place where all those people who've been traumatized and potentially died can return, and they can be there, play D&D for all of eternity.
I find that interesting, actually. The connection to D&D makes me think that it is somebody's projection. So did he have... because there's conversations about chess, but there's no kind of reference to D&D, and I get that the whole setup is that 1 and 11 are black and white and chess pieces and all the rest of it, but I'm like, the D&D seems to be happening external. So is it Will? Because Will D&Ds. So is Will creating the underground? Keep doing it. It's not the tube, it's not a train station, it's the Upside Down, which I love as a concept. I think that's really great. I think I have nothing more I think I have plenty more to say, but people are just going to get annoyed because it's a really long episode about Stranger Things, and I'm sure everybody's seen it by now and has their own opinion.
Well,
so if you want to tell me about your opinions, you can.
Let us know what you think of Stranger Things Season 4, and whether you think we're onto something with our pitch for Season 5's conclusion, where this is all going.
Season 5, the Care Bears season.
Absolutely. So yeah, I think we'll wrap things up there. You can't find us anywhere, because I killed all our channels. But we're on. We have a website, hopscotchfriday.com. We're on Instagram, Hopscotch Friday Podcast. You can email us.
Yes, there still is the Instagram kind of. I do see it. It's there. If you send a message, I'll get a notification. I just am not very creative with it because the internet sucks up all your time. Please listen to our podcast. It's really good. You can find us wherever you find your podcast.
That's it.
Pod things, podcasters.
That's it. Absolutely.
And you can email Emmett at hotfriday@gmail.com.
Yep. Yep.
And that's all of the things. You could send us a pigeon.
Yeah.
With a message.
Put a bird on it.
Put it on it. Don't put a bird on it. I don't think the cat would like that very much.
All right.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks, folks. Cheers.